Hey guys, it's Raythe here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the author of Everdark. Every week, I get together with the Everdark cast and we talk about things related to vampires, voice acting, and life. Sometimes I ask them questions, but sometimes they ask me questions. And by the way, we want to hear your answers to those same questions in the comments. So, vampires are associated with sex, often transgressive sex, and with having a freedom of sensuality that maybe most of us wish we had. A very body positive view towards things. But they're also predators, where sex equals feeding on prey, oftentimes. So in the last chapter, Julian agrees to drink Damon's blood, even though he knows it will kill him. On its face, that is not romantic, let alone sexy. But because this is a vampire romance, it's posed that way. How do you make dying sound sexy, Edward?
Le petit mort. I absolutely agree, right? There's always that wonderful association of the vampire as the person who comes into your bedroom in the middle of the night, perhaps through the window, when the diaphanous curtains are blowing in the breeze, and you're free to explore your own sensuality outside of the bounds of society. I think there's many things that I don't find sexy that other people do. And for me, it's acknowledging that sense of sensuality for me is about exploring your own ability to express yourself physically, romantically, erotically, having that language, that confidence, that space to do so. And I think that the medium of the novel and now the audiobook is a fantastic vehicle to explore that. It's a little bit voyeuristically, but also imagining when I'm reading it that I am one or more of these characters and have the freedom to imagine, to fantasize. So for me, it was coming down to the vampire's relationship with the act of feeding. And I think this idea of predation is very different from a consensual act that may involve sharing bodily fluids, whether that fluid is spit or blood. So I don't see that Damon predates upon Julian. I think it's very different, his relationship with him. So the idea of dying being sexy, well, it's one of the great taboos, isn't it? Death. What happens after death, if anything? But how does we make it sound sexy? It's the fact in this story, vampires are dead, I suppose, or are they? That's a good question. I'm going to divert for a second. In some vampire mythoses, vampires are dead who have risen or undead. But in this one, I got the sense that Damon never died necessarily. They talk about a second death being a final death. But are vampires dead in this world, or have they never really died when they are turned?
They never really die. And I think the immortals, especially Damon, who is very different even from the other immortals, never died. I don't even think he necessarily had a physical form before the ones he's taken on. I see them as beings completely of energy almost. Because he talks later about when everyone's looking at him walking naked throughout Balthazar's home, he took on a form that was pleasing to them. He knew it would be pleasing to humanity. He specifically chose it and made it the way it was. So that's very different. And then the immortals, as we'll sort of discover, they don't necessarily ever really die. They keep coming back. For humans, there's one death. They go through the veil. We'll talk about Callie. We'll know all about that. But for vampires, their second death is what allows them to go through the veil. Their first death, so to speak, just transforms their bodies.
That's what I got, this idea of transformation of energetic state, this idea of different worlds and different states. So that was kind of fun.
And from the
I'm trying to sort of come back to, yeah, please take over. I have no idea what I'm talking about anymore, Adam. So before I make a fool of myself, please.
I mean, I don't have anything particularly astute to say. I just am thinking more like, because it's a great question. How do you make dying sexy? For me, it's less about the dying and more about Julian's reason. It's almost a sacrifice, right? It's framed as he's made this decision to do this. And his decision roots from his bravery and a lot of dedication to his friend and a lot of dedication. There's a lot there. It's a heavy decision, right? His parents, and he's got a lot to prove. And so all of that kind of stuff is, I think, where the sexiness comes from. It's the situation around why he's made this choice. But the blood drinking specifically, that's hard to make sexy. I'll leave that to Edward.
I think that there's always just sort of been a link between sex and consumption. So legends and myths of vampires have been around forever. As far back as I think we know, there's been some sort of idea of one being consuming another and that act being sexual in nature. And when Christianity starts coming in, that sexual consummation, for lack of a better term, becomes evil rather than something we can enjoy.
That's a really good point, because sex and food, material goods of this world. And then as Christianity swept through, you were supposed to be thinking of the next world, not this one. You certainly weren't supposed to enjoy this one. My God.
I think there's also a link there between sex and fear. The fear of dying, but not actually, that this creature could take your life, but chooses not to. So like being close to a great white shark or a great lion, going to snuggle a lion that could turn on you at any moment, but chooses instead to purr and cuddle you. I think that sounds fantastic. But again, to Hannah, great point, that idea of for something to live, something must die.
It's definitely, I think vampires are often a rejection of, well, many current religions in that sense. But ironically, they actually created one of their own in Everdark, but we'll get to that. I hoped you liked this behind the scenes discussion with the cast and crew of the Everdark podcast. If you want to join the conversation, come to YouTube and tell us what you think in the comments. And just so you know, I'm not the only one reading the comments. The entire cast is too, and they're very eager and excited to hear from you. If you are already listening on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when the next episode of Everdark comes out.